So you seem to be the designated liaison talking to the police over there. Can you kind of talk to me about how you were tasked with that, and what was the conversation like?
Sure. Yeah, I'm an attorney with the Civil Liberties Defense Center out of Oregon, and we do activist defense around the country, and primarily climate campaigns, which often take place in very rural areas like this, but there's not a lot of lawyers and not a lot of legal capacity. So I'm here volunteering with the Red Owl Legal Collective, and today I was asked to be the police liaison, which basically means that you are the negotiator between the police and the activists.
So they had a yellow line where they basically said, if you pass this, you're going to get arrested. It looked like, to me, over at least 100 officers. They were holding billy clubs. One was in a tank with a shotgun. I don't know what else they had.
All those light armored vehicles.
So what were the conversations like? What is the liaison? Do you tell them what your intentions are and see what they'll allow?
Well, I take my direction from the water protectors, and in this case, they wanted to get over the hill to the construction site to do a prayer and to do a ceremony. So I approached them and asked them if it would be possible for us to continue on our way. And they said no, that by an order of the sheriff of Morton County, that we were not going any farther than that. The construction site was on the other side of the hill, and this morning several water protectors locked down to the construction equipment in the dark of night, so they didn't want us getting much closer to that. So they basically said if we crossed the line, we would be arrested. And then later on they basically said that we had to disperse, that we were blocking the road, that was arrestable, and either everyone had to go to the ditches or they would be arrested. And I had to remind them of some constitutional language, which they were very ignorant of because they're rural and don't deal with these issues at all, ever. Eventually, they conceded and allowed us to stay there to do the prayer, and the water protectors agreed that they would then peacefully walk back on the roadway. And then the activists decided that that was their goal for the day, and we're now returning back to the cars.
Now,
this is the dangerous part coming up.
Why is that?
We've had a number of people, what's called snatch and grab, which is people who don't intend to be arrested, have been stopped in convoys leaving the actions and have been arrested for things.
What kind of thing?
21 people last week were the last 21 cars in a convoy, did nothing different than the other 100 cars in the convoy. They got stopped and arrested for trespassing, and their cars were impounded. So they had to pay $250 bail and a $450 impound fee, and all of those charges are bogus. So literally, Morton County, made about $800 off of each of the 21. We'll likely get the charges dismissed. We're probably going to file a federal civil rights action for the unlawful arrests and the unlawful impoundment of their cars. But the intention with those types of actions are to scare out-of-towners from being comfortable coming to these actions. So they're trying to chill the rights of others to come and participate in these protests.
Now, let me ask you, because I don't think a lot of people understand. I don't even understand myself. What is? They say all of this is private property. Yes, the construction sites they say are private property. Obviously, the Native Americans say this is treaty land. Where can you go to demonstrate, and where can you park? Apparently, you can't even park. What is all of this technically private property?
Well, what we're walking along right now is ranch lands, private ranch lands. And so Dakota Access Pipeline purchased easements. So it's like they're renting other people's land, a strip where they're going to build the pipeline. And so they have property rights basically to that strip. So if we go on their strip, they can trespass us. If we go on this private ranch land, the rancher could technically, have us arrested for trespassing. Public roadways, the right-of-ways on the sides of the roads are all public forums, which means you have a constitutional right to assemble and express yourself in those areas.
So what if these are public roadways and all the cars are parked on public roadways? How are they snatch and grabbing, like you're saying, people who are parked?
Again, unlawful.
Right.
But in that case, we were driving away already. So people were in their cars driving away. That's been another major situation here, is the police targeting Native American people in their vehicles for very, very minor vehicular violations. Like, one person got arrested for going 1 mile over the speed limit. Another person got arrested for having a crack in their taillight. You know, it's forms of harassment, obviously.
And over up there, it looks like, to me, it looks like there's state police. It also looks like there's military people. Could you kind of talk about who are these people?
Well, those actually were not military people. Those are all civilian police, mostly Bismarck city police. Along with the county sheriff. Up until yesterday, we had Wisconsin state troopers, we had Nebraska cops that were all brought in to, further militarize the area. They just went home yesterday. And then in addition, you probably passed the checkpoint on your way here that is currently manned by National Guard military personnel. We're actually going to file a lawsuit challenging that in the upcoming weeks. Because, civilians aren't supposed to be policed by the military. It's bad enough that our civilian police look like they are the military.
So essentially, it seems like you have out-of-state police, city police, state police, all standing to protect a private company's pipeline.
That's correct. Often, especially in all of these pipeline situations, whether it's rural Texas, Minnesota, Montana, these are rural, poor areas that get targeted because they don't have the power to fight these pipeline routes coming through them. They often have very few cops, very untrained, and so when something like this happens, they bring in the troops.
And can you kind of talk about, it seems like a surveillance state here too. You have helicopters above, checkpoints.
Drones. If you go to the casino, you better have a VPN because
What's a VPN?
VPN is a virtual private network. It's a way to encrypt your internet use and your emails, because the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the feds actually have a big communications semi that you'll pass when you go back to the camp, and they're doing cell phone jamming and all sorts of shit.
So obviously you're an attorney, but just as a person, do you think they're doing all this essentially to assist them from finishing this pipeline as quickly as possible?
Absolutely. And that happens all over the place. The collusion between corporations and the state is just overwhelming at this point, And some of these corporations actually give money to the cops in order to support their policing efforts. In fact, in Texas, during the Keystone XL pipeline construction, TransCanada would go ahead of the pipeline and do PowerPoint trainings for local police, telling them what terrorist crimes they could charge activists with, gave them pepper spray and mace to use on the protesters. Basically came in with their own private police forces to bolster the ranks of the actual, licensed cops.
So it looks like also wasn't up there, but there's also mercenaries and private security that's been hired by the pipeline company. We saw that a few weeks ago when Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! Was shooting, basically them unleashing hounds on people. Have we seen more of that as well?
They have stopped using dogs, to our knowledge thus far. And many of those private corporate police are off-duty law enforcement officers. So they go back and forth between being public law enforcement officers and private goons where they make extra money on the weekends or whatever working for the corporations. So it's incredibly conflict-oriented.
And when
This is a boon for the, those local law enforcement, that light armored vehicle you saw and all that equipment, they didn't have that before this started. So it's a boom for law enforcement. They would get tons of money, tons of gear and equipment, and they get to keep it.
from the oil company.
Well, it depends. In this case, they've literally declared this an emergency. They've brought in Joint Terrorism Task Force, law enforcement personnel. So it's kind of a hybrid situation. It'll be interesting, actually, to follow the money in the aftermath of it. Nobody's done the public records requests yet to actually track that down, but as a journalist, it could be a fun project to take on.
And last question. So weeks ago, the broader public was cheering because they thought President Obama and the DOJ closed this thing down. Apparently that was just a specific area closest to the water, and that injunction has been lifted. My understanding of it was the injunction was put in so they could, quote, relook at the environmental effects.
Resources, actually. They were supposed to further look at the burial grounds that they've already desecrated here. And then, in order to sort of placate or appease the tribal governments, they did a historical survey, a cultural resource survey in that one particular area. Right now, they're claiming that 88% of the pipeline in North Dakota has been completed, 90% for the entire duration of it. This fight will continue for a while, but there's currently another fight happening in Iowa where pipeline construction has already begun in that stretch of the pipeline as well.
So here, the injunction was lifted?
Yes.
And what happened in that case? Did the DOJ and President Obama essentially look the other way?
Yeah, I mean, it was political maneuvering to begin with in an election year. They didn't really have any real backbone. I think there's been some call that if Clinton really wants the votes of environmentalists and millennials, that she will, publicly declare an end to these types of pipeline construction. Of course, irreparable harm has already been done to these areas and to the tribes themselves. But the flip side is that, this has been an incredible historic unification of tribes. There's over 250 tribes present on Standing Rock right now. Some of them have been enemies, for time immemorial. So Native American sovereignty and Native American issues in general have really incredibly benefited from these struggles. So regardless of what happens with this single pipeline, I think that the movement as a whole and the fights to come will be much more significant.
Lastly, sorry, it's the benefit of not being corporate media. I could go on and on. So what's the path forward? You're saying 88 to 90% is built. Obviously, we're out here. You have protectors, this and that. But once it's built,
well, they can build it. But just earlier this week, 10 activists were arrested for shutting down every single tar sands pipeline into the U.S. Only 10 humans jumped fence, turned the safety valves off, and stopped the flow of tar sands oil into the United States.
Where was this?
Montana, Washington, Minnesota, and northern North Dakota, all along the Canadian border.
And that sounds to me like the action that a journalist was arrested for.
Several videographers, 3 videographers were arrested. These locations were incredibly remote. They actually live streamed the actions, and there were only, I think, 5 or 6 people who were intending to get arrested. The other 4 were either support or videographers that were snatched and charged with conspiracy to commit the actual crimes. I think we're going to get those charges thrown out, but in the meantime, those folks were hauled to jail. Their cameras were seized. Luckily, they were live streaming, so the footage got out nonetheless. They're on felony bail, and they were a little shaken up because they were aware that it was a likely possibility, I think, but wasn't intending to be arrested.
Isn't one being charged with maximum 45 years in prison? Josh Fox's producer, Dea Schlossberger, I believe her name is?
Yeah, Dea has, I think, 3 conspiracy charges.
Conspiracy to commit journalism?
Yeah. Though, we'll see how things shake out. But when I talked to her a couple of days ago, told her take a shower, get a good meal. Things are probably going to shake out in the wash. But it's scary when you're not expecting that. And whenever you're dealing with critical energy infrastructure like pipelines, dams, train tracks, there is the ability for the state to enhance the charges against an activist. We actually haven't seen that here yet, but when you shut down every drop of tar sands oil into the U.S., you kind of have to expect, and you're going after Enbridge and Kinder Morgan and, TransCanada, these huge corporations. They got together on the phone with themselves and said, screw these people. We can't have the people of the United States thinking they can jump a chain link fence and hinder our profits, But I think it really illustrated that they can build it, but people can be like ants. We're going to be nimble. There's more of us than them. They can't protect every inch of pipeline in the United States.
Where could people find you? Are you looking for more legal assistance? Funds to help with your cases? Where could people help?
So our website is cldc.org, Civil Liberties Defense Center, and I think that there are several other GoFundMe places attached to the camp. There's also the Red Owl Legal Collective, which is located at the Standing Rock camp right now. And those are all great places for people to plug in.
Thanks so much for what you're doing.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.